Welcome to Slash Forward. I hope you're ready to examine a gaping hole with the 1987 kid adventure classic, The Gate. I'm also going to be doing a giveaway that's detailed at the end of the video, so be sure to check that out. And I have it timestamped for your convenience. Let's get to it. We open in a typical suburban neighborhood where the future prince of the vampires rides his 10-speed down the road and enters his home as if for the first time. No one answers his calls as he wanders about. He checks out his sister Al's room but is distracted from committing mischief by a noise from downstairs, where he finds evidence of a recent feast. The treehouse summons him and he complies, despite the weather turning against him. As a result, he barely has time to play with his favorite dolly before lightning strikes and fells the tree, causing him to wake up. He ponders this new experience, finding its symbolism to awaken a bubbling cauldron in the pit of his gut, where resides a latent compulsion toward destruction, and then realizes 'twas no mere dream, as he heads out to find a storm did, in fact, bring her down. Now he has a whole gang of teamsters in his backyard. After they remove the tree, we learn that they left behind a sweet geode and a smoking hole. And one of those two things was my nickname in high school. Glen and his buddy Terry go digging for more precious crystals and end up uncovering an actual portal to hell, which pays off in the form of a huge new geode. Then they observe as Alexandra, in her budding maturity, has turned her attention to shopping malls and is tossing out a bunch of smelly old rockets. A disappointment for Glen, who now needs supervision to blast off after a recent incident with the roof. As the afternoon rolls on, a mild plague begins to gently emerge from the hole, while the boys hang out and do some guy stuff. Then Glen's father observes the hole disapprovingly, but apparently misses its throbbing rim. At dinner, Al works her parents over hard, convincing them that she's old enough to take care of her and Glen while they take a weekend trip. They reluctantly agree to leave them alone, but only if Glen gets that hole filled in right after dinner. He does so, but then confides to his dad that there's something strange about that hole, and Terry agreed with him when he mentioned it earlier. But his dad brushes this off, warning Glen that the Tearster's a bit of a weirdo ever since his mom died. He's had some destructive tendencies, and he warns his son to be careful around him. Oh hey, thanks, ass! The next morning finds the kids saying their goodbyes as the rent's cut out, delirious with sexual anticipation. We then immediately transition to Al's rager, full of pop music, smoking, and stares of mild seduction. Upstairs, the boys are tippity-tapping on their geode, hoping to unleash its magnificent bounty, and they discover it to be full of sound and fury. The impact also created a strange magnetic phenomenon in the form of words, which Glen naturally reads out loud, because that seems like standard protocol. The result here is the hole unleashing a portion of its magical energy in the form of smoke. While inside, the party has settled into the ghost story phase of the evening, the typical precursor to full-on debauchery. As if to prove this point, they attempt to grunt out a levitation trick, but find Brody's girth to be unmanageable. Failing this, they decide to try it out on Glen because he's small. Susie guides them through the procedure despite her lack of accreditation, and he finds that a world without gravity is an incredibly dangerous place. His fear and surprise turns to shame, and he locks himself away in his room. Al and Terry coax him out by sharing their own embarrassing stories, but when he emerges, he wants to call his mommy. In order to sidestep the possible fallout, Al agrees to shut down the party and let Terry spend the night, if he agrees to keep his mouth zipped up tight. Later on, Terry takes a trip down the hallway to make water. While back in the room, Glen notices an abundance of moth action, as well as some unsettling movement inside his walls. Meanwhile, Terry notices and is confronted by an abundance of his dead mom, who reaches out to him hoping to pull him into a warm embrace as an expression of her undying love. But as they twirl in joyful reunion, Terry pulls back to see it was just Glen's dead dog. Oh well, I'm sure it wasn't your fault. The next morning, the friends say their goodbyes and Terry heads home to check in. A completely unnecessary step given the way his dad runs the house now. Glen figures that your dog dying is probably the point at which you'd want to call the parents. But Al hasn't cleaned up yet and insists on handling it herself, so as to appear more mature in front of her ridiculous friends. As that unfolds, we find Terry practicing some performance art in his room when he realizes that the album he's playing gives a very specific and detailed account of demonology that seems to relate very specifically to that giant gaping hole in his best bud's backyard. Meanwhile, Glen is trying to get the older kids to take him more seriously, but we learn that they've attributed his levitation to a mere trick of the eye. This is mostly the result of hormones, as we learn Eric is so thirsty for Al that he agrees to cart Angus all around town, so the ladies are free to head to the mall for some snackage. As they leave, Glen gets all up in his feelings about the imminent loss of innocence that accompanies the changing seasons of his life. He gets snapped out of this when he hears the bug zapper going nuts, which he goes to investigate. He decides to unplug it before noticing his steaming hole in the backyard, now unfilled. He runs to the front door, and just as he goes to leave, Terry arrives and tells him the bad news.
You got demons.
Their best bet? Cover it up with some crap they got laying around. While Eric is striking out with most veterinarian offices being closed, the boys head back to Terry's so he can fill him in on his learnings. Glen's not getting the connection here, so Terry takes him through it step by step. The hole, the geode, the levitation, all that's needed at this point is a sacrifice to fully open the gate. So it's a good thing that part never accidentally came to fruition. But anyways, so Eric circles back to the house to return the carcass and notices a very convenient and deep hole in the backyard. Terry figured out that playing his album backward provides a gate closure ritual, which they attempt to perform. But before they can finish, Al shows up and distracts them with a special treat. And since Eric filled things in for them, they walk away with a false sense of security. Soon, they're blasting off a two-stager like old times, and all seems right with the world again, until Al's terrible friends show up for a slumber party. Bored, the boys root around in the upstairs closet, uncovering a shotgun and old Thunderbolt, so you know they got some good times on the horizon. Later, as everyone in the house dozes off, a peculiar shadow is cast upon the wall. Then, with the bug zapper back on, Glen wakes up. Drawn to the zapper, the window truly grosses him out, before also severely endangering his eyes. He calls in Al to show her what happened, and they try to wake up Terry to see if he's okay. But he shows up behind them, curious about what they're up to, and they discover he's been replaced by a stinking surprise. Then a few slimy hands start pawing at Al, trying to drag her under, but only manage to come away with a minor souvenir. Everyone runs downstairs screaming, but are relieved to find that Mom and Dad have returned. But when Glen goes to formally greet his father in the manner he was taught, Daddy pranks him good by revealing his head to be a rotting husk, filled with fluid that disintegrates upon impact with the sidewalk. Inside, the kids get all torched up, and Al bravely ventures out to the back to check if the coast is clear for them. She doesn't see anything, but only because she's not looking down. Upon warnings from the others, she runs back and just barely makes it in. Now recognizing the gravity of the situation, she attempts to make a quick call to a Teen Throb hotline for advice, but unfortunately finds that her parents have blocked 900 numbers from the home line, so now their best bet is to venture into the basement to get the spells. Unfortunately, when they find it's been rendered unusable. As an alternative, Glen makes a recommendation that they grab a Bible. Now armed with the power of prayer, they again make their way out to the backyard hole. However, with mentions of sacrifice, Al's friends decide to split off here and wait out the conclusion. At the gate, Terry begins the selected prayer, and things begin to turn Old Testament on them, but with indications that it's working as they manage to at least get a downdraft going. Feeling fairly confident about his mastery of the dark arts, Terry gets a bit too close to the rim and ends up sliding to the bottom, where he finds he's been invited for dinner by the underground gnomes who disagree about who has rightful claim to Terry's haunches. Terry manages to break free and climb up a ways, and then is pulled to safety while the pit undulates with dark magic. Having lost his page now, Terry just tosses that bitch right in, setting the hole on fire and resulting in a satisfying explosion. In the aftermath, they find the pit has been filled in, so they dance on what has now become a mass grave for the gnomes. But when they return to the house, it's oddly quiet and still. The girls then hop out of the pantry, returning the general atmosphere to normal, and the fellas likewise jump out, looking to re-trash the freshly cleaned home. Having had enough excitement, however, Al tells them all to go head for the mountains, before heading off to clean herself up. The boys, too wired to fall asleep, go to watch TV instead when a body falls out of the wall. What's worse, it's some sort of mobile corpse, and it takes Terry before magically patching the drywall, upgrading this to kind of a medium bad situation. Glen runs upstairs and finds things to be fairly demonic, and when the corpse comes for another sacrifice, Al rocks the shit out of his face with the boombox, which causes him to fall into a dozen little gnomes. Glen has a momentary struggle with self-blame, but Al refocuses him by assigning the task of retrieving the shotgun. But when he reaches for it, Ratboy pops out and starts grabbing onto Glen's hand with his terrible teeth. Seeing that this is a demonified version of Terry, Al gives no quarter in compelling the release of her brother. They find that locking themselves in the closet is no help, as the demon corpse has free range of the wall system and is impervious to gunfire. As a result, he gets Al turned upside down, eliminating her greatest strength, being right side up, which allows him to drag her off as the second necessary sacrifice. So now Glen knows there's some big shit coming, but he remembers that the evil can be cast off with light and love, and he heads upstairs as the true gate reveals reveals itself. He pulls out Thunderbolt but has trouble getting her lit as the waves of hell crash upon his home, leaving him no choice but to fearlessly face down the main demon. He patiently waits for Birdo to puke an egg at him so he can throw it back, but they seem instead to reach a temporary understanding, and Glen is even granted the gift of true sight. As the demon retreats, he stumbles to a window to see the backyard hole is now evacuating its contents into our atmosphere. He then collapses in frustration and attempts to compel the monster's return by forsaking its gift. Then he makes his way down the frame of the stairs so he can get access to the electric ignition from his newest rocket. It requires 2 D batteries, an easy fix, which he finishes right as his new friend arrives. He fires off the rocket in such a way that the blast should melt his face off, but instead it just forcibly penetrates the beast's torso before exploding and killing it, throwing Glen safely to the outside of the blast radius while also setting off some celestial fireworks that clear the sky. He makes his way back to the smoldering wreckage of his home where Angus, Al, and Terry emerge from the closet alive and well. The kids then sit on the front porch and wait patiently for the return of their parents. I just wanted to give another huge thank you to everyone who watches and enjoys my videos for 10K subscribers. In this video, I'm continuing the giveaway in which 5 people who enter will win /forward hoodies. All you have to do to enter is like the video and then comment with your guess as to what movies are featured in my original intro.
Repent too fast. Forward into the darkness.
I'll be collecting entries in this video and the next video and announcing the winners in my March 16th video. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to my donors memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. The Gate is an awesome nostalgia movie. It really does a good job of balancing the kid adventure with horror in a poltergeist style. It hasn't caught on quite as well as some other similar movies from the 80s, but it does a really good job of capturing that essence and is well worth the watch. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.